Chapter 1134 of One Piece is out, and now it's practically confirmed. Shanks' twin brother appears in Elbaph, with the exact same cloak, the exact same angle, and most importantly, without any scar on his face, and on top of that, accompanied by another hooded woman. If there was ever any doubt about this, if it once seemed like mere conspiracy theory, now there's no more room for argument. Oda has practically confirmed the theory about the red-haired twin brother. Let's better understand all of this in today's video. Review the evidence that pointed to this theory, including evidence from before the publication of One Piece, back in the 90s, and theorize about the path the One Piece story should follow from now on with the presence of this new character. All this, but not before you click the like button and its twin brother, the subscribe button, so you don't miss the weekly videos about the One Piece universe. Let's go, everyone. To better contextualize everything that's going on, this theory began to gain traction after a Japanese YouTube channel got hold of a legendary interview with One Piece's creator, Eiichiro Oda. During the conversation, one of the hosts asked the following question. You must have been asked this a million times already, but could Shanks actually be two people? The other host chimed in, considering Shanks is sometimes drawn without his scar and how he reached Marineford so quickly after fighting Kaido. This refers to the scene in chapter 907 where Shanks is shown talking to the Gorosei. In this scene, the supposed Shanks doesn't show his scar, nor can we confirm the absence of his left arm. This contrasts with when Shanks is seen talking to Whitebeard, where he's drawn from a similar angle but clearly showing his scar. Another noteworthy detail is that Shanks is almost always drawn from an angle that highlights his scar, as it's his defining feature. However, during the Gorosei scene, Oda deliberately draws him in a way that obscures the scar's presence. In response to the question, most of Oda's answer in the interview was censored. The channel's captions even said, "Please draw your own conclusions about this." Shortly after, the channel revealed the end of Oda's reply, where he said, "But sometimes I just forget to draw scars." This question was the first major spark for this theory. While this alone doesn't confirm anything, the fact that Oda's reply was censored implies there's indeed a significant mystery. At the time, we didn't know whether it pointed to a government clone of Shanks, a naturally born twin brother, or something else entirely. But with this question, Oda hinted there was something big enough to warrant that censorship. Of course, Oda tried to downplay it by saying he sometimes forgets to draw scars, which is true. I mean, who doesn't remember when he mistakenly drew Zoro with Luffy's chest scar? True OG fans will recall that gem, but still the censorship hinted at something. More recently, this theory regained traction in chapter 1121 with an insane double-page spread showcasing the major players in One Piece's final saga. In this spread, we see Shanks higher up, his presumed father, Figarland Garling, to the left, and a silhouette of another man resembling Shanks at the bottom right of the image. He's holding a sword with his left hand, the very arm Shanks doesn't have, indicating this isn't Shanks. After all, Shanks already appears elsewhere in the image, making a double appearance unlikely. In the past week, we've seen some incredible new evidence that strongly supports the idea of Shanks having a twin brother, and I have to admit, it's made me warm up to the theory. The first piece of evidence is a set of incredibly old sketches from Oda predating the creation of One Piece. These come from concepts he had for other stories back in the 90s. One such story is called Land, the Dragon, and the 10 Thieves from 1995. In the sketches, we see the protagonist, Land, whose design is very similar to Luffy's. Also included is the original leader of the Order of Knights, who was exiled. And within these sketches, there's a prototype of Shanks, including his exact name as the current leader of this knightly group. How wild is that? A character named Shanks leading a knightly order in a story from 1995. Another story is called The Great Swordsman, created in 1994, even earlier than the first story mentioned. This time, Oda envisioned two protagonists, a swordsman and a knight, who would later inspire Zoro and Sanji. In this story, the swordsman is named Ryuma, a name and design later reused by Oda, while the knight is named Romeo. There's also the story of a bandit and a commanding knight, Woody Woodman. This one is a bit more abstract, so pay close attention. In this sketch, there's a character named Aka, who has a scar beneath his eye similar to Luffy's. However, the name Aka could reference Shanks' epithet in Japanese, Akagami no Shank, red-haired Shanks. Apparently, Aka is the brother of Doluk, another character seen in the sketch. AK is the bandit, and Doluk is the knight. This mirrors the idea of Shanks as a pirate and his twin brother as a holy knight. And further down, there's yet another character named Bantini, who has a scar identical to Shanks. As you can see, many elements were mixed and later repurposed for One Piece. The consistent knightly themes in these sketches indicate Oda's long-standing interest in the subject. He may not have envisioned Shanks having a twin brother from the very beginning, but the concept has existed in his previous drafts and has now been revised. survived. Looking at these sketches is like peering into the magical mind of Oda, showing us the ideas that flowed through him at the time. They suggest Oda has always been fascinated by the contrast between knights and bandits. This has now culminated in the creation of Shanks as a pirate and possibly his brother as a knight. Now let's discuss a second element that made me embrace this idea even more. It's Nordic references. As we know, the entire Elbaph arc, as well as part of Shanks' crew's theme, is heavily inspired by Norse mythology. Just look at the Viking ship of the red-haired pirates and everything we've been seeing during this arc. But what's truly fascinating and helps us understand Shanks' family story is the myth of Skjold and Hati, the sons of the wolf Fenrir. Skjold is said to chase the sun, while Hati chases the moon. Based on this, Skjold would represent Shanks' brother, who went to Elbaph to pursue Luffy, or in this case, the sun god Nika. Meanwhile, Hati would represent Shanks himself, who has always kept an eye on Blackbeard, symbolizing the moon. Let's not forget that we've seen a young Blackbeard sitting under the moonlight before. Luffy and Teach, then, would symbolize the sun and the moon, antagonistic figures, one being pursued by Shanks and the other by his brother. Furthermore, this reference strengthens the idea that the supposed father of these brothers, Figarland Garling, might have inherited Fenrir's powers, being the father of Skjold and Hati. For those questioning whether this supposed brother of Shanks is a clone created by the world government or someone naturally conceived, let's revisit the God Valley incident. We see a young Figarland Garling saying, "Pay close attention, kid." At first, this line was overlooked, as it could be interpreted as Garling addressing others as rookies or amateurs. However, we know Shanks was found as a baby in God Valley. Who's to say Shanks' brother wasn't present there too? In that case, Garling's words might have been directed at his own children when he told the kids to pay attention. Additionally, many people recalled an image of baby Shanks wearing clothes with a pattern of the sun, moon, and stars, reinforcing the idea we've been discussing here. Unfortunately, this isn't an official illustration by Oda. While Oda did draw baby Shanks once, it was just a rough sketch without these detailed patterns. The complete image, as we know it, was finalized by a fan. This is worth mentioning, even though it doesn't negate all the points we've discussed so far. Now, let's talk about the page we saw in this chapter. Wow, what a stunning and mind-blowing page. Lightning striking Elbaph's castle. Two people being summoned through a demonic summoning circle. One of them is identical to Shanks. The exact same beard, the same angle as before, but without the scar. Forgetting to draw the scar once is fine, but twice, especially after all the buzz around it, that's nearly impossible. And accompanying him is a woman with bandages on her face, apparently armor covering her mouth. I believe this woman could be another one of the Holy Knights. One detail about the summoning circle: we don't see any numbers in it, unlike when Saturn summoned himself in Egghead. This might mean the power wasn't used by any of the Gorosei, nor even by Figarland Garling, supposedly the father of these brothers. The only possibility I see is that Shanks himself might have this summoning ability, allowing him to move so quickly around the world. Of course, a few observations are worth noting. I still think it was Shanks who stopped the Paramount War, who fought Kaido in the New World before that, and that perhaps he reached Marineford so quickly by sailing through the clouds, or maybe Shanks himself possesses this summoning and teleportation ability. But everything points to it not being Shanks who appeared talking to the Gorosei in chapter 907. If it wasn't Shanks speaking to the Gorosei, then the pirate he mentioned to them might actually have been Shanks himself. However, I'd like to believe it was still Shanks who spoke with the Gorosei. It doesn't sit well with me that an official government agent, in this case a member of the Holy Knights, would need to sneak around to talk with the Gorosei. It makes sense for him to infiltrate Elbaph now while hooded, but not Maria Joa. So, we'll just have to wait and see. Now, my opinion on this whole story. At first, I must admit that I hated and rejected with all my might the idea of Shanks having a supposed evil twin brother in the story. First, because, at least initially, this had all the hallmarks of a pure and simple conspiracy theory. You know, the kind of thing like, Oda drew Shanks without a tiny bit of his scar. It must be someone else. When realistically, it makes much more sense that it was Shanks himself sneaking to meet the Gorosei in that hood, rather than it being an official government agent like the Holy Knights. Why on earth would an official and publicly declared government agent need to hide to talk to the government itself? Second, introducing a supposed evil twin brother would would completely strip Shanks of his complexity as a character. The true richness of Shanks's character lies in the fact that he is this enigmatic figure, a heroic symbol admired deeply by Luffy, but one who also occasionally takes actions that are, at the very least, questionable. For instance, secretly meeting with the world government and possibly discussing Luffy and his Nika fruit with them, which led the government to order Luffy's immediate execution, ultimately resulting in the awakening of the Nika fruit. In this line of reasoning, Shanks might have orchestrated events to ensure that Luffy would be killed, intending for him to awaken his devil fruit. Essentially, Shanks would be writing straight with crooked lines. This is exactly the kind of nuance that makes Shanks's character so rich and fascinating. But when you introduce the idea of an evil twin brother, you strip away all the subtleties that make him such an interesting character. Not only that, but this theory essentially places a moral shield over Shanks. To explain, Shanks is such a beloved character among fans that many can't even fathom the possibility that he might be morally ambiguous or take questionable actions, even if for a greater good. Shanks is seen as such a perfect figure that fans outright reject any notion of him being evil in any way. Now, I'm not saying that Shanks is necessarily a villain, but this view that some fans hold is almost identical to the idealistic view that Luffy himself has always had. It's as if these fans are embodying the same youthful Luffy who, as a child, saw Shanks as a perfect symbol. Unfortunately, I feel that the existence of this alleged twin brother only reinforces this innocent and idealistic vision that both Luffy and some fans share about Shanks. As I've mentioned, the richness of Shanks's character lies in the nuances of his actions. The real intrigue comes from the idea of Luffy, in the future, having his idealistic view of his hero shattered. The real drama lies in Luffy questioning Shanks's actions in pursuit of this greater good he seemed to be working toward behind the scenes, including even the possibility of Luffy's death during the Wano arc. Now, of course, the fact that Shanks might have a twin brother working for the government doesn't necessarily mean that Shanks himself can't have his own complexities. Oda could still very well explore Shanks as a character who operates in a morally gray area. But what worries me is that Oda might choose to simplify everything in a cheap reductionist way, like everything good was Shanks and everything bad was his evil twin brother. I really hope Oda doesn't go down that road. That said, with the evidence I've presented in this video, I've started to accept this idea a bit more, despite my concerns about what Oda plans to do with it. If you stayed until the end and enjoyed the video, don't forget to leave a like and check your subscription so you don't miss upcoming videos.